like to call to order the Monday, August 5th, 2024 meeting of the Wilson School Board. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case,
Here.
Mrs. Denny,
Here.
Mr. Hart,
Here.
Mrs. Casper,
Here.
Dr. Kennedy,
Here.
Mr. McCray,
Here.
Mr. McCree,
Here.
Mr. Schneider, Mrs. Cocker.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Please stand for the pledge to the flag. We have no items under communication this evening. And Mrs. Burkholder, do we have any public participation?
No, we don't.
Thank you. And Mr. Moravich, do you have a solicitor announcement of any kind? Okay, thank you. The board did meet in executive session this evening prior to tonight's meeting to discuss HR and property updates. Looking for approval of minutes from the July 15th, 2024 school board meeting. Looking for a motion for 2.1.
Denny.
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. McCree, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, this is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Payment of bills, Mr. McCray.
Yes, motion to approve the payment of bills from the general fund in the amount of $3,813,674.44 as attached.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. We have a motion for 3.1. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. McCree, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Case,
Yes.
Mrs. Denny,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. McCree,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Trickett.
Thank you, President Cocker. I'd like to present all of my items within the report, including the personnel and program recommendations. I'd like to highlight just a couple of items here. First one under 4.1, anytime we lose any of our teammates here at Wilson, it's always a bittersweet process that we go through. And Matt Citrone, as many of you know, is the first person listed here, has really been a valuable asset to our team. Came on board about 9 years ago and has grown in his role of meeting production manager, services the board frequently through his participation until recently Sam and the interns have completely taken over the board meetings. But just if you've come to any live performance, graduation, concerts, theatrical events, chances are that Matt and his team of students have had something to do with the production of those events, which really are hallmark events for our school district. We thank him for his time at Wilson and wish him the best. I know that Karen and team have a solid plan in place to have interviews and to get a strong team in place to replace Matt. And also support our great students. We want to make sure we start the year with a solid plan to support our interns as they do a lot of great work for the organization. As well as just some of the other folks that are on here as resignations. We wish all those people the best as they continue on in their journey. Also, I'd like to call our attention down to our professional hires. Had the chance to shake their hands here today. If you don't mind just standing for me so we can see you a little bit better behind the podium. Thank you. So all three of them are here today to be welcomed by our board and by our community, by our administrative team. We have Joe, Megan, and Morgan. All were able to be here today and get their goodie bag. For them, we will greet them again formally as a whole team next Tuesday as we start our new teacher orientation, although none of you are new to the field of education. I just want to thank you and greet you on behalf of the board and welcome you to the Wilson School District. Hopefully your experiences here today and in the future will be rewarding for you professionally and personally. That's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Looking for a motion to approve superintendent's items 4.1 through 4.6 as presented.
So moved. Case.
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, I would just like to echo Dr. Trickett's sentiments about those on the resignation list. Obviously, Mr. Citrone is going to be a huge loss, but I know that we have a plan in place to cover his absence, as well as our new hires. So welcome. Having a motion and second, roll call, please.
Mrs. Denny,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy, Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. McCree,
Yes.
Mr. Case,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
So officially, congratulations and welcome. Next, we have ratification or approval of the following field trips. Request permission to approve the high school boys soccer team traveling to Pittsburgh on August 23rd to 24th, 2024. No cost to the school district, no days out of school for students. Request permission to approve the high school boys and girls water polo teams traveling to Erie on October 11th and 12th, 2024. Cost to the school district is 2 substitute teachers for 1 day out of school for students. Looking for a motion to approve field trips for 5.1.
So moved.
Mr. McCree, thank you. Do we have a second?
Denny.
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, this is a voice vote, so all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Under consent items, request to accept with gratitude the following donations. 12 pieces of Grandview Gallery art, 12 pieces for the Grandview Gallery. A variety of artists, some, if not all of this art has already been in the Grandview Gallery and prior to the remodeling, and these pieces are being donated to the permanent collection. So thank you to the artists that donated their work, and we look forward to seeing it once everything is finished. Looking for a voice vote, or looking for a motion for 6.1. Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Do we have a second?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, this is a voice vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under Human Resources, 7.1, requests to authorize the superintendent to make employment commitments to qualified applicants for the purpose of filling vacancies that occur after the August 5th, 2024 board meeting, with action to be ratified by the school board at the next official meeting. 7.2, request approval of the support staff rate adjustments. 7.3, request approval of an agreement with Matthew Citrone. 7.4, request approval of the updated job descriptions as attached. Looking for a motion to approve Human Resources items 7.1 through 7.4. Mr. Hart, thank you. Do we have a second?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy, Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. McCree,
Yes.
Mr. Case,
Yes.
Mrs. Denny,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Under Student Services, 8.1, request permission to enter the names of the 2024 Wilson graduates into the permanent minutes as attached. 8.2, request approval to renew service agreements with the Wyomissing, Antietam, and Cardinal-Weiser school districts to provide special education services to students attending Wilson School District during the 2024-25 school year. 8.3, request approval of the Wilson School District's Office of Student Services program prices for supplemental contracts. 8.4, request approval of a resolution approving and adopting a student discipline waiver and consent agreement dated July 30th, 2024. Looking for a motion to approve student services items 8.1 through 8.4.
Denny.
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. McCree,
Yes.
Mr. Case,
Yes.
Mrs. Denny,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Under Operations, 9.1, request approval to furnish and install exhaust systems in the high school welding shop, per the proposal from CM3 using CoStar's program. 9.2, request approval for modifications to the high school shop wall and door, per the proposal from CM3 using CoStar program. 9.3, request approval to furnish and install a ventilation system for the high school paint room, per the proposal for CM3 using CoStar's program. 9.4, request approval to replace the library rooftop unit compressor at West Middle School per the proposal from CM3. 9.5, request approval to change order 1 for stormwater adjustments to E.R. Stubner for the High School Performing Arts Center construction. And 9.6, request approval for a new LED electronic message center at Spring Ridge Elementary, Broadcasting Road, per the proposal for signature sign using CoStar's program. Looking for a motion to approve operations items 9.1 through 9.6.
So moved. Case.
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second?
Denny.
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Any discussion? Dr. Kennedy?
I'm concerned about the sign in front of Spring Ridge from both a cost standpoint as well as a safety standpoint. I didn't like the sign outside of the high school either. I voted no on that, just to be consistent. Especially at Spring Ridge, because that's such a busy spot, and people should be driving, and that's a dangerous spot to drop kids off in the morning. There's a ton of, people should be watching the road, not watching a sign, flashing information. I just think it's unnecessary and like overkill and very, very, very expensive. That's almost a beginning teacher salary. It's probably two paraprofessionals in our district salary. Like that's a lot of money, and it's just not, it's just highly unnecessary. We have a million ways to communicate with our parents. And I also think it's just not safe.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Other discussion for operations items? Mrs. Denny?
I just want to say that I think some of this work that's being done on the high school, particularly for the tech ed program, is really great. It's pricey improvements, but it's really going to enable those classrooms to do some state-of-the-art stuff, and it hasn't been updated in a long time, so I think these are great improvements. I'd also like to do a shout-out to Mr. Simcox, because if anybody has walked around our facilities, in particular this summer, there's been a whole lot going on. Our field looks gorgeous, the wall looks gorgeous, our track, I think, may be done or is about to be done, or it's like, there's so much going on, and he's the one in charge of making sure all that happens, and it's a big job. And our students are really benefiting from it. So we are very fortunate to have him on our staff.
Thank you, Mrs. Denny. Other discussion? Dr. Kennedy?
Can we pull that out?
Sure. Yeah, I'll have us vote on 9.1 through 9.5 and then 9.6 separately. Do I need to?
Can we continue to make comments though first?
Of course. Do you have a
Okay.
comment, Mr.
Yeah,
Case?
just a couple. I just want to say I'm thrilled that we're still investing in our tech ed center, and just wanted to, for the community, there are a couple of high dollar items here. They have all been pointed out and communicated through the finance portion of the facilities committee meetings at the last one. So these were earmarked. The sign was earmarked, budgeted for $60,000 on the financial plan. So coming in at $42,000, it did come in under cost. So I do thank Mr. Simcox and the team for at least controlling those costs. Anyway, I just wanted to add that the $240,000 was earmarked in facilities, and so this was expected. Thanks.
Yep, and thank you, Mr. Case. And just to add on to that, too, a number of the tech ed items are also for safety purposes, right? Like there's a painting, an exhaust fans. I mean, it's all.
Air quality, safety.
Right.
Yes.
So a lot of really are necessary. And just to kind of go back to Dr. Kennedy's point, I also voted no on the Whitfield, on the sign by Whitfield, pretty much for the same reasons. I don't know that we've seen an increase in accidents or anything there, but I also don't know how many people have picked up on, oh, there's an event happening because they saw it on the sign, like cost versus benefit. So I understand, I had similar feelings on the Whitfield sign as well. So the kind of right there with you.
Well, and I want to remind everyone that originally when Whitfield wanted that sign, we were told we had to fundraise for that sign. And it wasn't until the high school decided to just steal our corner, our Whitfield corner, that they suddenly, we just wanted a sign that said, here's Whitfield. And our HSA raised money for it. And then the high school campus, like they overtook it and it became this big, big thing.
Well, and, I mean, to be fair, the sign on that corner it does advertise for the whole district, so not just it's just a central location. And then the goal is to have them kind of spread out throughout the district, so, Whitfield/high school, right? And then Spring Ridge, and then I would assume the next step would be Southern and Cornwall. So, Green Valley and West, I don't know if that's because it's a different municipality, so I'm not sure what the process is there. But,
Just to point out, that money, they did do fundraising for that about 12 years ago, and they were told no, they could not purchase it, so that money got diverted into a different project. So they did do the fundraising for it at about $25,000 back then. Much more expensive now by waiting, so.
okay, so we'll make a motion specifically just on 9.6 when we get to that, correct? Okay, Mr. Case?
I just wanted to ask Dr. Trickett, if there has been any feedback at all from the community at all on signs and communication, how often people use them, appreciate them, offer feedback?
I can't provide that. However, our strategy is not to put digital signs at every school. It is truly to look at the roads that are most heavily traveled. One way it does help communicate is to people that aren't part of our normal listserv or normal parents of students in the school district. It reaches a broader group, taxpayers, community members that could benefit possibly by some of the events that we have. It is a large cost, and that's something, Dr. Kennedy and Mrs. Cocker, that we've wrestled with too. Like, is there a return on your investment? It's also making sure that it's updated and it's current and it's accurate and it reflects the values of our school district. Are we advertising all of our events equally? Is it a district communication tool? Is it a building communication tool? Ultimately, it came through our team as a request. There is currently in the capital budget one other sign, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Troutman, but I believe the Southern Cornwall Terrace would be the next designed sign that would come together when we would do our addition project. But we are not currently looking at digital signs in every building.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add that a lot of the current signs with the, how they do it, the inserted letters aren't always updated timely. So I'm assuming the ease of use allows this, to your point, to not just advertise more events, but also more timely updates, hopefully, too.
Would it be acceptable to have Mrs. Troutman explain a little bit about how those signs are updated?
Sure.
Okay, so originally, when we put the sign in on Vane Reed Road, obviously we felt that that was a great location because it is such a heavily traveled road. So we do utilize that sign sort of as part of our district kind of branding strategy, right? So there's layered ways that we communicate, right? We don't expect the sign is going to make all of the difference in how we communicate, right? It's a layered thing, right? So you might see something on social media, you might see something on our website, you might see something, you might have gotten an email and then you see it on the sign, right? That's just a marketing strategy. It's just one more thing. Think of like a billboard, right? Any of you that have been involved in marketing, a billboard is not probably your only way you market, but it's an addition to it, right? So I've had experience with that in the past, and that's sort of how we view that sign. We feel like it's a really good location. So I do update it. It comes all out of my office. I update it through a program that is proprietary to the sign. We utilize all of our district branding to do that. So I have a program that I utilize, and all of our district branding is used to do that. The other piece of that sign that's been really important is that, we have a contract with Market Street Sports, and part of that advertising is that they do get space on that sign. So I try to keep between 4 to 5 items that rotate through on the sign. So speaking of Spring Ridge, obviously we would incorporate district communications, but also things that are specific to Spring Ridge, just like we do for Whitfield. So if Whitfield's having an event, I work with our program coordinator, she gets me the information and we put that on there, but I manage all of that through our office. Is there anything more? Any other questions that you might have?
So then the signs have the potential to generate some revenue for the district?
It's an add-on, right? It's an add-on opportunity to advertise. We also use that sign for things like, different holidays that are happening, things like that. Just some goodwill in the community. If we win an event, if we, a state championship or a district championship, we put things up there with our graduates. It's just a way for us, again, to brand our district. And I think it just portrays a very professional way to communicate who we are as a district and to ensure that we are on point with our branding. So, yeah.
Well, I think the comparison with that and a billboard, I think is really kind of an easy thing to kind of hook on to. Like that makes a lot of sense. We're advertising to everyone that passes. Here are some events. We couldn't do that any other way. Like Mr. McRae said, that when you just insert the letters, like, okay, school's going to be out these 2 dates. That's it. That's all you get. So, okay. Thank you, Mrs. Troutman.
You're welcome.
I mean, if I could just suggest, maybe through the goodwill of internal dollars and budgets, take some of the money from the Market Street, and maybe pay for half the sign that way. I mean, we could still approve it this way, but, alternative funding.
Okay, well, thank you for that robust discussion. Are there any other comments for operation items 9.1 through 9.5, let's say? Okay. So, Mr. Ravitch, just to check, I will call a roll call for 9.1 through 9.5, and then we'll have to do an individual 9.6.
Besides all the discussion right now is on 9.6, yes. That's
Yeah, right. Okay. So since we have a motion and a second for 9.1 through 9.5, roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. McCree?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Looking for a motion for just 9.6.
So moved. Case?
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second?
Hart, second.
Mr. Hart, thank you. Any discussion that we haven't already had? No? Okay, good. Roll call, please, on 9.6.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. McCree?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
No.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 no.
Under Curriculum and Staff Development, 10.1, request approval of a contract with Teaching Well in Schools to facilitate professional development engagement sessions. Looking for a motion for 10.1.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Do we have a second?
Denny?
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. McCree?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Under Transportation, 11.1, request approval to award the liquid propane gas base bid to Jerome H. Rhodes, Inc., and 11.2, request approval to award the liquid propane gas facility maintenance to Hiltz Propane Systems. Looking for a motion to approve transportation items 11.1 and 11.2.
So moved. Case?
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second?
Denny?
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, I know we had previous items for these bids. I'm glad they are finally officially through. I'm sure Mr. Williams is as well, to start the school year. Since having a motion and a second, roll call, please.
Mr. McCree?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Under Food Services, 12.1, request approval of bid awards for the 2024-25 school year. Looking for a motion for 12.1. Mr. Hart, thank you. Do we have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. McCree?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Under Early Learning Childcare, 13.1, request approval of the 2024-25 Parent Handbook for Wilson Early Learning Programs as attached. Looking for a motion for 13.1.
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Do we have a second?
Denny.
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, so I have one minor part. This technically is not, so the handbook that we're voting on here is for our early learning programs, which are housed in Berkshire Heights, and the one pre-K counts, classroom at Cornwall Terrace. But it's childcare. So I was actually interested, because we had the company, the Champions Company, approved last year, and this is going to be our start of the school year. While it's not this actual item, I was wondering if we could have maybe an update on the program for before and after school childcare. Mr. Maravich, is that appropriate, even though it was not necessarily an item, but it's related? Okay.
We can have a discussion on it. We're not voting on it.
Okay, all right, so I was wondering, if, Dr. Trickett, if we could have just an update on how everything's being rolled out and what what it's going to look like for this year for our first experience with Champions.
Is it okay for us to welcome Dr. Stout up to the podium to provide an update? Thank you, Dr. Stout.
I just happen to have brought with me an update. Thank you for inviting me to give an update. We're actually very pleased with the relationship that we have in partnership with Champions, the KinderCare company in general. They have been super responsive. Every Friday, I've been getting updates on not only student enrollment, but as well staffing. So where we are right now is we have received successful licensing approvals for all of our sites, which we didn't doubt that we would. And then as far as recruiting goes, we are fully staffed except for one site director position, and as of last Friday, they had a hiring event, and they're very vehemently pursuing getting that person hired, so we're in good shape there. This week, we have health and safety in-person training, so we're excited, and in fact, the enrollment is something that I didn't imagine, but I'm very pleased to report. So at Cornwall Terrace, as of today, and P.S., I should tell you that our 2 kindergarten jumpstart events that have already happened also have hosted Champions, and Champions has talked to families, and we're continuing to enroll. So we have the rest of those events this week, and let's see what happens. Right now, Cornwall Terrace has 44 students enrolled, and this is before and after care, keep in mind. Green Valley has 42. Spring Ridge has 28 enrolled, Shiloh Hills 30, and Whitfield 64. So we're, again, very proud to have partnered with Champions so that we can provide this service to our families, and we're really looking forward to a great year working with them. Any questions for me?
Dr. Stout, how do those numbers compare to, not last year because Green Valley wasn't up the whole time, but let's go back 2 years. Do you have that information?
Off of the top of my head, I do not, but I can tell you that when we were unable to open Green Valley, they were our largest enrollment at 34, and Spring Ridge was actually under 20 at one particular point. So this is probably double enrollment from where we had been. So again, very exciting for our families.
That's wonderful news.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stout. All right, so we have a motion and a second for 13.1. Any other discussion on the actual handbook for early learning programs? Okay. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Denny,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. McCray,
Yes.
Mr. McCree,
Yes.
Mr. Case,
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no.
Under extracurricular, 14.1, request approval of the updated 2024-25 admission rates as attached. Looking for a motion for 14.1.
Denny.
Mrs. Denny, thank you. Do we have a second? Mr. McCree, thank you. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper.
I know I bring this up every year, but I am proud of our district for decreasing our activity fee for our students in extracurricular who participate in extracurricular this year. And I know we are offsetting the cost for that. And I know I bring this up every year that I think our students should be charged to participate and to attend our events. And given that the growth of our district, especially since a lot of the families that are coming, some of our fastest growing population are free and reduced lunch, and our wealth gap in the district is continuing to increase. And yet we know that our wonderful events are opportunities for our students and our families to come together, and our community events are really a wonderful opportunity to get a sense of community at Wilson, and they really are engaging for our families, I know, as a participant. So we want to make sure that we open that to as many families as possible. So I will continue to see if there's a possibility that we can offset that cost and still make it free for our students to attend those activities. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. Any other discussion for 14.1? Okay, hearing none. Yes, Dr. Trickett.
Mrs. Casper brings up a conversation and a point that we've talked about quite a bit as a leadership team, trying to essentially remove barriers that currently exist for some students and families to participate. And the activity fee reduction was one of the things that we brought forth that came out of some of the work that actually occurred in this room years ago when we were talking about our equity policy and the committee that arose through that process. While this recommendation tonight does not include a $0 charge for students, I do want to remind our students and our families that there is the ability to bundle. The student rate is $3 per student, but parents and family members can purchase a 10-card punch pass for $20. So for 10 activities or access into 10 events, those are mostly sporting events because our choir and our orchestra and our band events are no charge. They can get a punch pass from the athletic office for $20. There's also an unlimited pass as well for $40 for students. We will also continue to have the conversation, and I think it's a good conversation to have. I know there is some reservation regarding the ability to track kids that come in and out, and there's some things we'd have to work through in order to ensure that we're consistently implementing our procedures. Currently, we do not, in certain events, allow for kids to come in and out freely throughout the sporting event. So there's just some procedural things we'd have to work through before we would move fully into that direction.
What about in the future, something like our students who receive free and reduced lunch get a punch pass, that they are given to that family?
I was even thinking as one of the goals we had as an organization last year that was successfully accomplished was the implementation of an electronic ticketing system. I'm curious if there is a way, partnering with our vendor, that we could do something for Wilson students that could produce some way to, because that system allows us to track the participants at these sporting events. So I think that we have some work to do there and look at some of those different options because we want our kids at our events. That's what we want, all of our kids. This is the best place for them to be. On a weekend, in the evening, we want them here.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion for 14.1? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. McCree?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
No.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 no.
That takes us to committee reports. BCTC, Mrs. Casper?
I do not have a report.
Thank you. BCIU and Curriculum Committee, Dr. Kennedy.
Neither of those committees have met, so I do not have a report. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Services, Mr. McCree.
No report.
Well, this is going swimmingly. Burke CIT, Mrs. Schlossman. All right. Extracurricular does not have a report either. However, next Monday is the start of fall sports. So technically, the technical start of sports will be next Monday. Yes. Yeah, well, it's not really a good day for heat acclimation either. It was beautiful today, so comparatively. So, yes. So next Monday, start of fall sports will be on the fields at like 8 a.m., welcoming the students. My favorite day of the year. 8 a.m. during the summer. All right. So that's
Some
the
of
end
the students will be going home at that time.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Some sports get there a lot earlier than when we see them. So that is the end of my report. Facilities Committee, Mr. Case.
Thank you. I don't necessarily have an official report, but I'll just give a couple of updates of things that are going on throughout the district. So the Operations Department has been extremely busy getting all the schools and the campuses ready for the beginning of school. You'll see, if you notice, go through any of the schools, there's lots of edging, there's mulching, there's a lot of painting going on, so a lot of great things getting ready for the school year and the kids. There's a lot of paving going on in the district from the township with regards to township stuff. So if there's any community concerns at all with some of the street paving in the district, the operations team is in close contact with the township, and all paving is anticipated to be complete prior to the start of school. The southern classrooms that are currently being built to accommodate the music program will be finished this week. The Gursky track overlay is underway, and that's going to finish this month. And let's see, there was a Spring Township Planning Commission meeting August 1st that our district did attend and present, and they're kind of going through a couple of preliminary things for, just land development and a couple of the exceptions to get through for zoning. So that's still in progress and more to come on that. And many other summer projects along the way, including painting, as I mentioned before, building and removing walls, and in various locations throughout the district. And with regard to the Performing Arts Edition, that's moving forward, and now that we're technically out of the ground and all the mechanicals that are underground are kind of beyond us and past us, that team has made significant progress in regaining some of the lost time that was lost earlier in the, due to unforeseen circumstances and conditions. So anyway, things are going well, and this room's going to get new carpet soon. It's coming in tomorrow, so more to come there. Next meeting's August 12th at 4:30 p.m. That's my report. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Finance Committee, Mr. McCray.
No report.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider is not here this evening for legislative. Human Resources, Mr. Hart.
No report.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
I just have one quick update. With the new school year quickly approaching, we've been busy preparing to execute our back-to-school communications plan. So we just want to remind all families that they're going to be receiving communications regarding online student registration, student schedule release dates, transportation schedule information, and food service updates next Monday, so a week from today. It's especially important for all families to complete the student information update that will be available beginning again on August 12th in Skyward Family Access. This information needs to be provided so we can be sure we have the most current information regarding our students prior to the start of the new school year. So all the details regarding how to update this information will be in that email communication as well as on our website, and there will be reminders going out through all of our district communication tools. Thank you.
Thank you. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
No report.
Technology Committee, Mr. McCray.
No report.
You guys. And Mr. Maravich, do you have any solicitor? Okay, and we don't have anything for public participation on non-agenda items. I don't think that's a record. Any anything from the board? Any other business? Yeah, Ms. Denny?
I do, sorry. So we talked about the opening of fall sports, which I think is so exciting. There's been kind of a big sports event going on in the world recently, the Olympics. I'm sure people have been following it. Dr. Kennedy has on her USA stuff. I had a very unexpected adventure recently. I have two very good friends who live over in Europe, and I had the opportunity to visit them. And the day before I was supposed to come back, the CrowdStrike incident happened, and my husband's airline that he works for got hit really hard. And while they were trying to recuperate, I couldn't get back. I actually got stuck over there. And instead of being able to go out of Amsterdam on Saturday like I was supposed to, the only flight that I could get out of was Charles de Gaulle on Tuesday. So having to take lemons and make some lemonade, my friend whose family had tickets for an Olympic event on that Wednesday, we said, let's not go to Paris. Why not? There's an Olympics going on. I had never been to an Olympic city. She had never been to an Olympic city. So we managed to get there. Everything fell into place. And it was such an incredible opportunity to go and be in an Olympic city right before the Olympics. We rode on the train with some of the Belgian Olympians. We got to see some of the preparations for the opening ceremony. We ran into some parties where they didn't let us in, unfortunately, but we could see Olympians. We were close to greatness. So since coming back, I did finally get home. Thank goodness. My family was pretty happy about that. Since then, I have been following the Olympics really closely. And one of the things that I think is most impressive about this year is that it is the first year in Olympic history that there is parity in male and female athletes. And I have been especially impressed with the female athletes and how they have supported each other and lifted each other up. And probably the greatest example of that, because there have been too many incredible moments to mention, but the most noteworthy one I thought was when Simone Biles and Jordan Childs lost. They got silver and bronze, but they lost to a Brazilian gymnast. And they literally bowed down to her because she defeated the GOAT, you know, she won. And they were strong enough athletes, strong enough women to realize that this woman's lifetime accomplishment didn't diminish them, that they could recognize the greatness in another athlete and celebrate her victory together. And as we're looking at the opening of the school sports, if you look at Wilson, and I realize that we're all pretty biased, but I would imagine that we dominate Berks. We may not win every sport every season, but if you look at the totality, I'm sure that Wilson is far in advance. Much like the USA, we just hit 3,000 medals in history, which is more than twice whatever the next country is, which I'm not even sure what it is. So I would imagine that's kind of the situation with Wilson. But if you look at our athletes, I would imagine that 90% of our athletes don't go on and play collegiate level sports. And of the ones that do, 99% of them don't progress past that. So our goal, while it may be to produce student athletes and it may be to produce winners, because everybody likes to win, we're more looking at developing strong students, strong community members, people who know leadership and hard work and the qualities that come from that. And I do think that our coaches do a really good job. If you look at most of our high school sports, they do a lot of community service. And I guess I would just, I've been to many sporting events where I have seen, and it tends to be parents more than kids, making unkind comments. Sometimes it's Wilson's students, sometimes it's the other students. It doesn't happen all the time, but any sports parent, I'm sure, has seen this. And I guess I would remind everybody that these are kids, and they're learning, and anything they're doing is really great. And they're going to come out as really good adults because of this experience. And that, personally, I would rather Wilson lose with dignity and sportsmanship than win any other way. So I am so excited for the coming year and all of the sports that we have ahead of us. I wish all of our team luck, and I wish success to all of our athletes, and I look forward to what's coming ahead.
Thank you, Mrs. Denny, for your positive message. Yeah, it's a great way to start it off. Any other business from the board? Okay, then hearing none. Oh, Mr. Schneider's not here. Looking for a motion to adjourn. I know. Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.